Hello everyone, welcome to the Grumpy Old Hunter. Today I'm going to give you some tips on how to track a wounded deer and take you on one of my most difficult tracks ever. So I kill more deer than the average hunter, at least 3 every season, but I've had my share of deer that have been hit and not recovered. However, I pride myself in my tracking ability, whether it's man or beast, and I hope to give you some tips here that will make your tracks more successful. So here's the backstory. You guys know that I love to hunt out of my JX3 hybrid, but 5 days out of the season I hunt out of my remaining hang-on stands because I want to make sure they're set up properly for friends and family when they come up to hunt. And I just told my girlfriend the day before that I'd like to make a video on how to track deer. And I didn't know this was going to happen, but here's the result. And of course, I didn't have a battery in my Tacticam, so I didn't film the actual shot. So this starts after I've already hit the deer. Okay, so it's opening day, and I was just talking about doing a video on tracking a blood trail. And I hit a 4 or 6 point, I didn't bother counting them all, at about 15 yards from up in that tree stand. And there's decent blood on the arrow, but I think the shot was a bit high. So there's not a lot of blood here, which isn't a good thing. But it seemed like a good hit. It just seemed a little bit high. So we'll track it and see. But what I like to do is stick the arrow in the ground like that and use that as my starting point. And then I know the deer ran this direction. So I'm going to go in arcs back and forth until I find the blood trail. Once I do that, once I find another blood spot or whatever, I'll take my engineer tape and tie it to the tree there. Then I can use that as markers all the way down. So I'm going to move on, start tracking it and doing that, and then show you how I do it. And hopefully at the end of it, there'll be a dead deer. So you'll need some essential equipment to make your tracking easier and increase your chances of success. I use engineer tape because it's cheap and you get a lot of it. So you'll need engineer tape or some type of trail marker. I also carry 8 to 10 small Sialoom sticks for night tracking, but I use them differently because you can still see the engineer tape at night. So if I just can't find the blood, I'll hang the Sialoom stick as a point of reference until I find more. Then I'll go out and bring the Sialoom stick with me and replace it with engineer tape and continue the search. Now I've tried blood lights. I don't find them helpful. You could try those and carry it with you when you hunt, but as a minimum, you should have some engineer tape. All right, so I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's blood spots on the leaves. Little ones, which isn't good. There's some down there. There's one on the side of this little tree. But what I do is I take my engineering tape and I'll mark it. So this is the first place I marked. It's, I don't know, maybe 10 yards from where my arrow is. And now I'll go back and grab my arrow, and then I will track this and continue to track it. And every time I stop, I'll mark where I'm at with the engineer's tape so that I have an easy point of reference if I lose the blood trail. Then if I lose the blood trail, I'll go out in arcs again. And some people are going to dispute this, but from my experience, the deer is going to be heading in the same general direction. Every once in a while I've had them deviate from that, but the vast majority of deer that I've tracked, if they've started heading northeast, for example, they continue northeast until they drop, or in one case last year, till he jumped over a fence and I couldn't track him. The other thing that I would suggest is that you load your bow or your crossbow or your rifle when you're tracking the wounded deer. There have been several hunters that have been killed or injured by wounded deer tracking them. So I don't like to track one without having my crossbow or my rifle loaded. So the way I do it is from the last blood spot I can see, if it's dense cover, I'll work my way out in 120 degree roughly arcs until I find more blood. Unless it's an open area, then I'll walk out about 20 yards and work the same arc only back towards the last drop. That way I cover more ground. And of course, this only applies if it's a hard blood trail to follow. If you can see the blood, you just follow the blood, right? It's simple. But sometimes, and in this case, you'll see the bleeding increases and then it goes back to next to nothing. Okay, so I'm about 40 or 50 yards into the search. And just as I suspected, the bleeding's getting heavier. So I don't know if you can see it, but now it's on the ground, up on the trees, up on the leaves, so it's getting heavier. But I still, when I get, as you can see, this stuff's pretty thick, and you can see the blood actually is spread out over about a 2 feet wide swath. But I hunt in the really thick stuff, and that's why I bring the engineer tape to be able to mark it so I can walk around the thicker stuff. I don't want to fight my way through. So anyway, here we go. There's a lot of blood right in there. And it's going down. You can almost see where he went. So we'll keep following him and see what happens. Okay, this technique comes in handy too if you come to like a thicket that you don't want to fight your way through. You can just mark one side of it where the last blood drop is, work your way around it, and then align yourself with that blood drop again. The other thing to keep in mind is don't ignore all the other signs besides the blood. When the deer's running scared, it's going to be just like we are. It's going to be busting through the brush. It's going to break branches. It's going to tear up the ground. So don't ignore those additional signs as well. So one other thing to look for is when they're moving like this and he hasn't bedded down this whole time. But when they're moving like this through the thick brush, they will break branches and hang on vines as well. So that can also assist you in looking where he ran. Plus they tear up the ground when they run. So you can look for torn up ground like right there. You probably can't see the blood, but there's a bunch of blood right there as well. So you kind of look for the signs, just like you were tracking a person. There's a broken branch there that he broke when he went through here. So when they're moving quickly, especially when they're going through the thick stuff, they do the same things we do. They're going to break off branches as they go because their main concern is just getting away. I don't think this guy, well, I mean, he must know I'm behind him, but I waited at least half an hour before he even got down and checked the arrow. So I was hoping he would have bedded down, but he didn't. So either something scared him or he saw me or who knows. But here we go. Another thing to keep in mind is that a wounded deer isn't always going to bed down. Sometimes they're just going to run a short distance and stop and look around and try to figure out what just happened. Then they may see you and take off running, or they may start walking away. I'm not a person who's going to wait 5, 6, 7 hours to go track the deer, especially when it's 70-degree weather or hotter, early season. So I wait about a half hour to an hour, and then I'll get down and track. And in the most cases, the deer that I've tracked, only one of them have ever bedded down. The rest just kept on moving the whole time. So another thing to keep in mind is that the blood trail might peter out. I don't know if you can see the 3 drops of blood in this picture, but sometimes you're looking for just little tiny drops. And then sometimes it'll pick up again. Now at this point, I've been tracking this deer for about 2.5 hours through some really thick stuff, and I'm starting to get worried, honestly, that I'm not going to find him. But I keep finding small blood spots, and I keep moving in that direction that he was originally going. Now he's curved a little bit to the left, but he's still going in that same general direction. And the key is just to keep persevering until you find the blood. And literally, if I can't find it for an hour, I might give up, but it's got to at least be an hour without finding any blood. And I'll keep going back and forth until I do find it. All right, so try to get you a good angle here. So here he is, finally, after, Jesus, I don't know, 600 yards. He's bleeding, he's bleeding, he's bleeding. And there he is. And it's funny because until I walked over here, there were 2 bullfrogs sitting on his back. So there he is. I got him. Good track. And it just shows you how you need to persevere even when you lose the trail and just keep finding it. So there it is. Now I got to figure out how to get him out. So I spent about the next 40 minutes gathering dead trees to lay across the log that he's up against so I could reach him. The water there is about waist deep and there's probably a foot of muck at the bottom. And I know that because I fell in. So it was too deep for me to wade in there and get him out. Plus it was really nasty. So I had to build a bridge across that dead tree that he's up against so I could get in there and get a rope across around his antlers. So I dragged him out, and that took another probably total hour and a half. So by this time I've been in the woods about 8 or 9 hours, and I'm pretty tired. I got him out, got ready to go, and then of course got hit by a torrential downstorm. So long story short, I ended up, first time I've ever done this, I ended up quartering him in the field and packing him out. But the main thing is I was able to track him, able to recover him, and ended up with meat in the freezer. So if you liked the video, click the like button, subscribe, tell all your friends, and thanks for watching.